everyone, editor here. So one thing I forgot to mention in the video was on the day of when you go to vote, if you are in line and closing time is coming and has passed, but you got in line before closing time, they still have to let you vote. No ifs, ands, or buts. They have to let you vote because you were in line ready to vote before they were supposed to close. So remember that. And now for our feature presentation. Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is DJ and we are going to talk about voting and voter rights today. So first, we are going to start off by talking about provisional ballots. So what is a provisional ballot? So a provisional ballot is used to record a vote when there are questions about a given voter's eligibility that must be resolved before the vote can count. So basically, if there's questions of, are you
sure you're a registered voter in this area? Some information's not lining up. I don't think you're supposed to be voting here.
If you go up to the polling place and you go to sign in and you show them your ID and they look at it, and something that could cause you to get a provisional ballot is that your address does not match what they have on record. So they'll look at your ID or driver's license, they'll check the names, and most times they'll check the address. And if it does not match up, they'll ask you, are you sure you're supposed to be voting here? Or they might tell you, oh, you live in this area, you have to go here and vote instead. With a provisional ballot, you will also have to possibly do some extra steps to prove that you are who you are. Let's say if you live in the same county, it might not be as bad if it shows that you live in the state of New York and you just moved there about a year ago, but you didn't do your due diligence of changing your ID over, and your ID still says you're from Wisconsin. They're going to be like,
I don't think you're supposed to be here.
So one way to prove that you live in the correct area and that you are who you are. So you may use a bank statement if you choose banks that shows your information and also will show your up-to-date address. You may also use a utility bill that will show your name and up-to-date address. Depending on where you live, that is okay to use. Depending on where you live, that may not be okay to use. So you just want to check your local county and the city and town and make sure that's one way you can go over that. Another thing with provisional ballots, if you signed up to do an absentee ballot and something happens as if like you do not get it, or maybe you change your mind and you're like, I'll go in person instead. If you go up there in person and you're like, oh, I'm here to vote, and they're like, well, we have you marked down as an absentee ballot, or you're supposed to mail in your ballot and not walk in and do it, they might have you do a provisional ballot to maybe investigate further. We show in our system that you have not voted yet, so it is permissible for you to vote. But because it might be in the mail, we'll have to do it as a provisional ballot and make sure we don't get 2 votes from you via mail and walk-in. So with the provisional ballots, depending on your state, there are a limited quantity of them. So if you live in a state where they're like, okay, each polling station should have 150 ballots. If you are person 151 that asked for provisional ballot, you were just out of luck, my friend. Or they might be able to do something, just ask them questions. I never have been in a position to use a provisional ballot, but it's something good to know rather than, oh, after I was turned away from voting. Like, no, you can still vote unless you want to just come back later with the correct information or ID to prove you're who you are. Or that you live where you say you live. So just remember that. Provisional ballots are not guaranteed sometimes. So keep that in mind. But just make sure to ask further questions of, are you sure? What are my options? Is there something else I can do? Can I possibly go to another location depending on how the voting is set up? Where I live, you can go anywhere in the county to vote. Back home where I grew up, you have 1 to 2 places depending on your address. So you go in to vote. You've gone and researched your ballot. Remember, ballotpedia.org. Research your candidates and the legislation and possible changes to your constitution that will be on your ballot. You've looked into that, you've made your decision, and you're like,
let's go in, let's mark this ballot, let's check the boxes.
So you researched your ballot, your registration's good, you got everything squared away if there was any mishaps or saw some addresses were not showing for the right area. So you go in. So the acceptable IDs anywhere you go to vote in the United States are the driver's license, state-issued ID cards, military ID cards, and passports. So across the board, you should not have any trouble using that as identification to vote. So get in there. Some things that are non-photo ID, because maybe something happened, or maybe your ID is expired for more than a year, because in some states, if your ID is expired for more than any given amount of time, they'll say, no, we don't have to accept this as identification, or we cannot accept this as valid identification. You can use a non-photo ID, such as a birth certificate, a social security card, a bank statement, or a utility bill. Now, remember, you will have to look into each state and make sure those are okay to use, because it might not be okay and they could easily turn you away. But don't walk away. Ask for a provisional ballot. So if you are someone who needs special accommodations, such as someone who might be wheelchair bound, or you might be blind or visually impaired, they should have accommodations for you. It's usually better to contact them ahead of time and be like, hey, I plan to vote on this day at this time, or on these days and these times. Do you have the right stuff for me? For example, if you need wheelchair access, all places by law should have wheelchair accessibility. If they don't, that location can get in trouble. Or there's something called curbside voting, where they bring the ballot and some of the information to you to mark. Now, for curbside voting, they will probably bring you a paper ballot. You will mark off on it. And so what usually happens, you can do one of two things. You can either have 2 poll workers come down, they'll watch you do your ballot, and then they'll take it up there. Or a poll worker comes down, someone who may have brought you to the polling place may go up there with the poll worker and make sure they scan it through and that your vote is counted. So that is also another way that is done. If you're also maybe someone who is very elderly, or you may have issues with movement, getting up and moving, you may possibly request a curbside voting. You can usually just have someone pull up and just tell them, hey, go upstairs, go to the front of the line, tell them, we need a curbside vote if possible. Here's the situation. Here's why they're down in the car, right up front. What can we do? Because standing in line is not an option. So if that is an issue, that you do have options to still vote. If you are someone who is not very well versed in the English language, I know in some places the ballots comes in various language options. I know where I live, the ballot is in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. However, there are other people who are U.S. citizens who may not know English that well to read through and comprehend the ballot very well. So they may go and possibly have an interpreter with them to help them with their ballot, or they may bring a family member to help them interpret their ballot, which is completely allowed and okay. If the person you use to interpret your ballot is a 10-year-old child, you can do that. The person you use to interpret your ballot is a legitimate interpreter, you can do that. So it's okay to have someone by your side to help you through your ballot. Like, no one cannot tell you, no, you cannot, you two cannot stand next to each other and vote. Like, yes, you can. I have done it before with my grandma, grandpa, and mother. They have done it for years with each other when they went up to vote when I was little. I have seen other families do it when they went up to vote. If you're someone who is visually impaired, meaning you may not have the best sight, but you still have some sight, but you still have like issues reading possibly, you may use someone to help you read through your ballot with you and help you to mark your choices. You are allowed to ask the poll workers, hey, I need some help or I need assistance. And it is permissible for certain poll workers who are properly trained to help you. I don't know if all of them can help you, but those who are properly trained are allowed to help you to just read the ballot or whatever, but they cannot tell you how to vote. There may be signs a couple feet from the front door of the polling station or the voting station, and it will say things along the lines of no campaigning past this point, no campaigning beyond this point, meaning there's not supposed to be anyone wearing a button or something being like, like, vote for so-and-so, vote. No, that is a big no-no. That candidate can get in trouble, or that person can get in trouble. Along the lines of that, you're not allowed to wear certain campaign things while you are going to go vote. Like, the poll workers can legitimately turn you away if you're wearing certain shirts or hats, vote so-and-so, blah, or vote blah, blah, blah. Like, they can be like, no, you're not allowed to vote, because it might look like you're trying to influence other people's voting when you do that. So that's not allowed. So make sure when you go vote, yeah, you might have some cool, nifty, support your candidate t-shirts and whatnot, but you are not allowed to wear that when you physically go inside to vote. There are also signs where it says no campaigning past this point. That's wearing that t-shirt and just being in that area. That's technically campaigning. So don't do that, because you might not be able to vote if you do. So how it goes, it's usually polling places should be free of politicking so that voters can cast their ballots in peace. I did not know politicking was a word, but hey, we learn something new every day. While you're voting, you may be in line, or you see someone get done, or you just get done and someone asks you, so who did you vote for? It is perfectly fine for them to ask that question. You do not have to answer that if you don't want to. You can if you want. It's allowable, but yeah. I've legitimately seen that happen when I was a little kid at one time when my grandparents and mother were going to go vote. Some elderly guy asked another elderly guy, I was like, so who'd you vote for? And the other guy was like, I voted for myself. And so that was that. Like, you can do it. It's not highly frowned upon, but try to avoid doing it like that loud. Like, that's legitimately how loud that conversation was exchanged. We were standing in line to sign in to vote, so that's it. You go in and you see some fishy stuff going on while you are in line voting, or the poll workers are doing some sketchy stuff. You are allowed to report that stuff. I know in some locations they will have like a number or website or email posted of if you see anything questionable about this voting process, please contact us at sketchyvoting.org at gmail.com or 1-800-SKETCHY-VOTE. Stop it. So if you're somewhere and you see something sketchy like voter fraud or voter suppression, like maybe they go, oh, well, you have to pay a fee. That's illegal in the United States in this day and age. Oh, well, you have to take a test to vote. Also illegal in this day and age in the United States to vote. You can actually report it to your state or territorial election office. You can also report it to a local FBI office, a local U.S. Attorney's office, the Public Integrity Section of the Department of Justice's Criminal Division. If you witness or suspect voter intimidation or suppression, like as in like maybe you're at a election drop box and you see people with guns standing by it, that can be labeled as intimidation. Or if someone's like, oh, well, you speak this language, so even though you're a registered citizen and like you kind of need help with the language barrier, we can't allow you to vote. Like, no, you can't do that. Like, if you're registered to vote and you're a United States citizen, unless there's a legitimate reason to do a provisional ballot or something, you can vote. Language barriers is not a reason to not let anyone vote. So just want to let you know. So if you see something like that or witness it, you can also contact your state or territory election office, contact the voting section of the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, use the election complaint report online form, and then sometimes they might have signs up for like a number. And if you see something like that, try to record it a little bit and maybe intervene if you feel comfortable enough. I know people are tired, like, well, why did someone record and not do something? Like, because when you're 5'1" and you see someone who is 6'5" about to fight with someone else who is 6'5" also, this is not a fight that you're gonna come out of unscathed. So yeah, you might not be able to physically do something, but maybe recording could help their case later. Also, early voting, where you early vote at may be different than where you may vote on November 3rd, the Tuesday of voting, very last day for 2020. Make sure to look that up. I highly encourage it. The first day, I know there was someone who was like, I waited about an hour and some minutes to vote. The next day, I legitimately saw a line where I am going to go vote at, going around the building. And I'm like, awesome, this is day 2. Everyone's getting out here voting early. And I'm just like, I am definitely not waiting till November 3rd to vote. If you want to be a poll worker, because one of the issues with there being less places to vote at is because there's not as many poll workers who volunteer. So usually there are people who are elderly or retired who are like, oh, I'm going to go volunteer at the polling station and do a little bit extra for my civic duty. And because of the coronavirus, COVID-19, there are many elderly people who are like, I'm at high risk. I have diabetes. I have high blood pressure. I have high cholesterol. I'm just very vulnerable to catch this, and I really don't want to be in a position where I'm interacting with various different people all day, and I honestly probably could not track them as easily if I was to catch it or if I was to spread it. Some are just setting this one out, and because of that, there's not enough volunteers, so they have to stop with some of the polling stations, or they might not have as many open early voting days. So if you want to be someone who volunteers, just go to your county website, or you can go to usa.gov, and that will take you to the correct website where you can register and sign up to be a volunteer to help with working polling stations. Thank you for watching. That's my video on voting and voting rights. So if you have any comments or questions, just comment down below and go ahead and give me a like and subscribe. And don't forget, if your addresses don't match, ask for a provisional ballot. Can't go wrong with it. Get you a provisional ballot and resolve your issues within the correct time frame.